Garrett slid the blue folder across the table and said, "Sign it, Nora. Don't make Mom beg 1 week after burying Dad." Sabrina touched my mother's wrist and smiled at me like I was a child caught stealing. "Honey, nobody's saying you didn't help. We're saying you already benefited." Then she said the words that made the whole kitchen go still. "You lived here rent-free for 6 years." For a moment, I heard nothing but the old refrigerator humming behind me. The kitchen still smelled like funeral lilies and reheated chicken pot pie from Mrs. Donnelly next door. On the counter sat 3 casserole dishes with masking tape names on the lids, the kind of food people bring when they do not know what else to do with grief. Outside the window, late October leaves stuck wet against the glass. Columbus had turned gray overnight, cold enough for breath to fog, but not cold enough for snow. I had just washed the last plastic medication tray Dad would ever use. Monday morning, noon, 6 p.m. bedtime. I had scrubbed each compartment with dish soap because I did not know what else to do with my hands. Mom sat by the window in Dad's old cardigan, twisting a tissue until it looked like white string. Her name was Marjorie Whitman, but in that kitchen, she looked smaller than Mom, smaller than Widow, smaller than herself. Garrett sat at the head of the table, which had been Dad's chair. He had not asked if anyone minded. His suit jacket was off, his dealership watch flashing every time he moved his wrist. Garrett always looked like he was about to close a deal. Even at our father's funeral, he had shaken hands like there were customers in the pews. Sabrina sat beside him, pretty and polished in a cream sweater, her nails the color of pale pink roses. She had cried beautifully at the church. Not loud, not messy, just enough to make people touch her shoulder and whisper that she was such a blessing to this family. Garrett tapped the folder. "The house is too much for Mom," he said. "Property taxes, insurance, utilities, maintenance. You know what that roof cost last time Dad patched it himself? This isn't practical anymore." I looked at Mom. She kept her eyes down. "We talked to a realtor," Sabrina said gently. "You talked to a realtor?" I asked. Garrett's jaw tightened. "We got information. That's what responsible adults do." Responsible. The word landed between us like something dirty. I thought of the night Dad froze halfway between the bathroom and the hallway, his body locked, his eyes wild with shame. I thought of my arms under his shoulders, my knees on cold tile, my voice steady because his pride could not survive my panic. I thought of blood pressure logs, neurology appointments, insurance calls, pharmacy shortages, bed rails, shower chairs, and the sound of my phone alarm every 3 hours. No one at that table mentioned any of it. Sabrina folded her hands. "Nora, no one wants to fight. But we all have to be honest. You've been here 6 years. No rent, no mortgage, no separate utilities. That mattered." I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, because if I did not laugh, I might break something. "You mean I benefited," I said. Garrett leaned back. "You said it, not us." Mom flinched, but she still did not speak. Garrett opened the folder and pulled out a few pages clipped together. He turned them toward me like a salesman showing financing terms on a used SUV. "This just says you won't interfere with listing the house," he said, "and that you're not making any claim against the property. Clean, simple, better for everybody." "For everybody," I repeated. "For Mom," he said sharply. "Don't twist this." Sabrina slid a pen across the table. It stopped beside my right hand. That pen looked ordinary. Black plastic, silver clip, probably from Garrett's dealership. But I knew what it was meant to do. It was supposed to shrink me. It was supposed to take 6 years of bathing my father, lifting my father, feeding my father, arguing with insurance companies for my father,
and turn all of it into a room I had used without paying rent. I looked at Mom again. Her lips parted. For half a second, I thought she would say my name, not even defend me, just say my name like she remembered I was her daughter too. Instead, she pressed the tissue to her mouth. Garrett saw the opening and took it. "Nora, you're making this ugly," he said. "Dad wouldn't want this." That was when something in me went quiet. Not peaceful, not calm. Quieter than that. A place beyond begging. I pushed the pen back across the table with 2 fingers. "I won't sign anything at a dinner table." Garrett's face hardened. "Unbelievable." Sabrina's sweetness thinned. "You're turning grief into a property fight." "No," I said, standing. "You are." My chair scraped the floor. Mom's shoulders jumped at the sound. I carried the clean medication tray to the counter and set it beside the sink. It looked useless now, empty and shining under the yellow kitchen light. Garrett called after me, "You're hurting Mom." I stopped in the doorway. For 6 years, that sentence had worked on me. "You're upsetting Mom. You're stressing Dad. You're better at this. You understand medical things. You live closer. You're already there." Every chain in my life had been wrapped in the voice of someone asking me to be reasonable. I did not turn around. Behind me, Sabrina whispered, not softly enough, "She's going to be a problem." I looked down the hallway toward my old bedroom, the one I had moved back into when Dad's diagnosis became bigger than everyone's promises. For the first time since the funeral, I did not feel tired. I felt warned. Back then, I lived in a 1-bedroom apartment, 15 minutes from the home care agency where I worked. I was 30, with scrubs behind my bedroom door and a supervisor position being discussed by people who thought I was ready. I thought I was ready too. Arthur Whitman hated the diagnosis. He had spent 40 years fixing engines, garage doors, and lawnmowers. To him, Parkinson's was not just an illness. It was an insult. A man like him did not ask for help. He tightened things. At first, he joked around it. When his hand trembled over coffee, he said the mug was nervous. When I offered to drive him to Dr. Elaine Brooks, he told me I drove like a church lady avoiding potholes. He still sat in the garage with country radio crackling, sorting tools he no longer trusted himself to hold. Mom helped him pretend. "Your father is just slowing down," she said. "Everybody slows down." I wanted to believe her. Garrett did too, because belief costs less than responsibility. He came by some Sundays, talked dealership numbers with Dad, slapped him on the shoulder, and left before medication schedules entered. Then came the January night. The roads had a thin glaze of ice. I was half asleep when my phone rang. Mom's name lit the screen, and before I answered, my stomach already knew. "Nora," she gasped. "Your dad fell. I can't get him up. Did you call Garrett?" I tried. He didn't answer. I was out of bed before she finished. I drove across town in sweatpants, winter boots, and an old nursing jacket over my pajama shirt. When I reached the house, Mom was kneeling in the hallway, crying into both hands. Dad lay near the bathroom door, one arm tucked beneath him, his face gray with pain and shame. "Don't make a fuss," he muttered. "Too late," I said. "You already invited me to a hallway party." His mouth twitched, barely. I checked his pupils, hip, wrist, and shoulder. I asked what hurt, what time he fell, what medication he had taken, whether he had hit his head. My hands moved like a nurse's hands. My heart was just a daughter's heart banging against my ribs. At the ER, Mom kept asking if he would be all right. Dad kept apologizing to nobody in particular. I answered intake questions because I knew more than I should have known. Garrett arrived after sunrise with a Starbucks cup and the stunned look of a man who expected disaster to respect his schedule. "I came as soon as I could," he said. Mom believed him because she needed to. Dad looked away because he did not want his son to see him on a hospital bed. I had been there all night. No one said that part. The doctor said nothing was broken, but the fall meant the house needed changes and Dad needed closer monitoring. That phrase hung over us like a sentence nobody wanted to read aloud. Garrett rubbed his jaw. "Okay, we'll make a plan." I wanted to believe that we had weight. I went straight from the hospital to work. In the staff bathroom, I changed into scrubs and washed dried salt from my face. My first patient was an 84-year-old woman whose daughter had labeled every drawer, pill bottle, and emergency number. I admired that daughter. I did not yet know I was about to become her. The next Sunday, I brought a folder to Mom and Dad's house. Not a legal folder, not anything official, just a plain white folder from the office supply aisle at Kroger, stuffed with printed calendars, medication charts, appointment reminders, and a list titled Dad's Care Plan. I had stayed up past midnight making it. I told myself that if everything was clear, nobody could misunderstand. Garrett would see what needed to be done. Sabrina would understand Mom needed help. Mom would stop calling me for every small fear because she would see other names on the paper too. That was how hopeful I still was. Mom made coffee in the kitchen and set out a plate of store-bought oatmeal cookies. Dad sat at the table with one hand resting over the other, as if he could hide the tremor by holding it down. Garrett arrived 10 minutes late, wearing a dealership polo and checking his phone. Sabrina came behind him with sunglasses on her head and a paper bag from a bakery. "I brought muffins," she said brightly. "Stress eating helps, right?" No one laughed, but she smiled as if we had. I spread the calendar on the table. Dad has neurology every other month, physical therapy twice a week for now, and we need someone tracking medication changes, I began. Mom can't do all of this alone. Garrett nodded too quickly. Absolutely. That word should have comforted me. Instead, it sounded like a door closing politely. "I can handle the medication chart," I said, "but I need help with appointments. Garrett, could you take Dad to Dr. Brooks when I'm working?" He rubbed his thumb along his coffee cup. "My schedule at the dealership is different every week. You know that." "You get your schedule ahead of time?" "Sometimes. But customers don't buy cars on a nurse's calendar, Nora." Dad looked down. I turned to Sabrina. "Could you help Mom with groceries and online bills?" "She gets overwhelmed by the insurance paperwork." Sabrina pressed a hand to her chest. "Of course I want to help. I just can't promise set days right now. The boutique is in a rough season, and vendors are breathing down my neck." "Then what can you promise?" The room went quiet. Mom reached for my wrist. Her fingers were cold. "Honey," she said, "I only trust you with your father's medication." There it was, a sentence wrapped like love and tied like rope. Garrett leaned back, relieved. "That makes sense. You're trained for this." "I'm trained to do it for patients," I said. "Not alone, around the clock, for free, while everyone else says they're available in theory." Sabrina's smile tightened. "That feels a little unfair." Dad lifted his head. "Nora's asking for help." Garrett looked wounded, which was one of his best tricks. "I never said I wouldn't help. I said my job is unpredictable." "So is Parkinson's," I said. Mom whispered, "Please don't fight." And because she said please, the whole conversation shifted away from Dad's needs and toward Mom's peace. That was how it happened in our family. The person asking for fairness became the person causing tension. The person avoiding responsibility became the person being attacked. Sabrina took out her phone. Why don't I make a group text? We'll call it Dad Care Team. That way, everyone can jump in when they're able. Jump in? Like Dad's illness was a swimming pool. She created the chat before anyone agreed. Then she sent a heart emoji, a folded hands emoji, and a photo of the muffins. Garrett typed, Team Whitman. Mom smiled weakly, grateful for the appearance of unity. I stared at the calendar. Nearly every blank square had already begun leaning toward me. After they left, I gathered the papers from the table. Dad remained seated, quiet under the yellow kitchen light. You shouldn't have to beg, he said. I softened my voice. Neither should you. He tried to answer, but his hands started shaking harder. Pride moved across his face like pain. I opened a new notebook and wrote the date at the top of the first page. Medication taken, fall risk high, family meeting held. Then, because I was still trying to be fair, I added one more line. Care plan pending. I did not know that notebook would outlast every promise made in that kitchen. I moved back into my childhood bedroom with 2 suitcases, a laundry basket, and the lie that it would only be for a little while. The room still had pale blue walls, a dented dresser, and a box of yearbooks Mom never threw away. On the closet shelf sat a softball glove from junior year. I stood in the doorway holding my pillow, feeling like I had walked backward into a life I had already survived. Dad joked from his recliner. Guess the prodigal daughter returned. I kissed the top of his head. Wrong story, Dad. I didn't spend the inheritance. He chuckled. Then his hand shook so hard the TV remote slipped to the floor. That was how those days worked. A joke, then a reminder. At work, my supervisor called me into her office. The agency wanted me for a supervisor position. Better pay, better hours. A real step forward. I sat there in my navy scrubs, thinking about medication windows, bathroom transfers, and Mom's voice saying she only trusted me. When would it start? I asked. 2 weeks. But 2 weeks was impossible. Dad needed morning help. Mom froze when instructions changed. Garrett said he would try to cover appointments, which meant I would spend every week wondering if try had become forgot. I turned the promotion down. You're a strong nurse, Nora, my supervisor said. I smiled because I did not know how to say strength was starting to feel like a punishment. Ethan tried longer than I expected. He brought takeout after my shifts, waited in the driveway when Dad had a bad night, and once fixed Mom's pantry door without being asked. He was not a villain. That almost made it worse. Our last dinner never made it past the appetizer. Mom called because Dad could not get out of the bathtub seat, and she was crying too hard to explain. I left Ethan at the restaurant with 2 untouched salads and a candle between us. 2 nights later, he sat beside me in his car outside the house. I love you, he said, but I don't know where I fit anymore. I wanted to promise him quiet Sunday mornings and movies we finished in one sitting. But through the front window, I saw Dad shift in the recliner, and I knew my phone could ring again any second. I don't know either, I whispered. He cried before I did. After that, life narrowed. I bought grab bars from Home Depot, a shower chair, non-slip mats, pill organizers, and disposable gloves in bulk. Insurance covered some things and argued about others. Small bills were easier to pay than fight. Sabrina praised me for being organized. Garrett said, "You're just better at this stuff." Mom thanked God for me, then asked if I could call the pharmacy again. Nobody said, "Nora, what did this cost you?" So I stopped expecting the question. My days became measured by Dad's body. Tremor before breakfast, stiffness after lunch, a dangerous shuffle near the hallway rug.
A better evening if the medication landed right. At night, I sat on the edge of my old bed and stared at my work shoes, always ready by the door. I did not lose my life all at once. I gave it away in small, reasonable pieces to people who called each piece love. Thanksgiving used to be Dad's favorite holiday because nobody expected him to wear a tie. He liked turkey, football, and the smell of butter burning a little on top of the stuffing. Before Parkinson's, he would stand in the kitchen doorway and pretend to supervise Mom, even though all he really did was steal pieces of crispy skin from the carving board. By the second Thanksgiving of his illness, he sat in his recliner with a blanket over his knees, wearing the good flannel shirt Mom had ironed for him. Garrett and Sabrina were 40 minutes late. They came in laughing, bringing cold air, perfume, and a pumpkin pie from an expensive bakery in the short north. Sabrina kissed Mom on both cheeks and said, "Marjorie, this house smells like home." Mom lit up. That was one of Sabrina's gifts. She knew exactly what sentence a lonely woman needed. Garrett clapped Dad on the shoulder, too hard, then bent close when Dad winced. "How's the old man holding up?" Dad forced a smile. "Old man can still hear you." Everyone laughed because laughing was easier than noticing how thin his voice had become. Dinner was careful. Turkey cut small, green bean casserole soft enough. Mashed potatoes with extra gravy because Dad's swallowing had been tricky that week. I watched him between bites, not staring, just tracking. I knew the difference between a tremor and the beginning of choking. I knew when his pride needed silence more than help. After dinner, Sabrina decided we needed a family picture. "Come on," she said, already holding up her phone. "Arthur looks so handsome today." She moved a lamp, adjusted Dad's collar, tucked the blanket lower so it would not show, and told Garrett to stand on one side while she stood on the other. Mom hovered behind them, grateful to be included in something that looked normal. I was in the laundry room. Dad had had an accident before dinner. Mom had panicked. Dad had gone rigid with humiliation, and I had changed the sheets before the guests arrived. Now the washer thumped against the wall while I poured bleach into the utility sink, scrubbing what the photograph would never hold. My phone buzzed. Sabrina had tagged me. The picture showed Garrett's arm around Dad, Sabrina smiling softly, Mom leaning in with red eyes. The caption read, "Blessed to care for Dad together. Family is everything." Comments had already started. "What a beautiful family. Garrett, your dad is lucky to have you. Sabrina, you are such an angel. Praying for all of you." I stood there with rubber gloves on, smelling bleach and turkey grease, reading strangers applaud a performance staged 20 feet from the truth. I did not comment. I rinsed the sheet until the water ran clear and told myself silence was dignity. But silence has a cost. Every time you do not correct the lie, someone frames it and hangs it on the wall. Later that night, Dad caught my wrist as I passed his chair. "You saw it?" he asked. I knew what he meant. "Yes." His eyes shifted toward the laundry room. "I'm sorry." I squeezed his hand. "You didn't post it?" "No," he whispered. But I let them stand there. Christmas Eve came a year later with the same kind of lesson. Garrett had promised to stay overnight so I could sleep. He said it in front of Mom, which made it sound official. I changed the guest bed sheets, wrote Dad's medication schedule on a yellow legal pad, and set out the emergency numbers. At 9:15, Sabrina appeared in the hallway wearing her coat. "The dogs are losing their minds with the neighborhood fireworks," she said. "We really have to go." "There aren't fireworks," I said. Garrett avoided my eyes. "Somebody down the street was setting stuff off earlier." Mom murmured, "It's all right, honey. Nora knows the routine." Of course I did. They left with containers of leftovers and apologies light enough to float.
I sat beside Dad's bed that night while the house next door played Christmas music through outdoor speakers. At 2 a.m, his body stiffened and his hand reached blindly for mine. "I'm here," I said. His fingers closed around my wrist. In the dim light, he looked not only sick, but awake to something deeper than sickness. "This isn't right," he whispered. I did not answer, because if I opened my mouth, all the years I had swallowed might come out at once. Dad had never been cruel. That would have been easier. Cruelty gives you a clean enemy. Dad gave me something harder. Love mixed with old habits, pride mixed with blindness, and Ohio stubbornness that could fix a carburetor but could not say, "I was wrong." Garrett had always been his boy. When we were kids, Garrett got Saturday mornings in the garage. He learned socket sizes and oil changes. I brought lemonade out, held the flashlight, and got praise for being a good helper. Dad did not mean to make that sound smaller. It just was. By the 4th year of his illness, the garage had become a museum of who he used to be. Tools hung in perfect rows. Country radio still played from an old speaker. One afternoon, I found him staring at the lawnmower with his cover half off. "Don't say it," he warned. I was going to say the mower looked scared. He almost smiled. I tightened what his fingers could not. "Your brother used to know how to do that." "Garrett still knows," I said. "He's just busy knowing it somewhere else." Dad looked away. That was the first time I saw him choose not to defend Garrett. After that, I noticed him noticing. He noticed my alarm before sunrise. He noticed bruises on my arm. He noticed when Mom asked Sabrina about online banking and Sabrina's voice got too sweet. "Oh, Marjorie, don't worry about those passwords," Sabrina said. "Garrett should help with accounts. Nora already has enough on her plate." It sounded thoughtful, but Dad's eyes sharpened. Sabrina made control sound like kindness. She called Mom sweetheart, and then asked which card handled pharmacy bills and whether Mom still used the same email password. Mom answered because she was tired of feeling foolish. I was folding towels when Dad spoke. "Marjorie handles her money just fine." Sabrina laughed lightly. "Of course, Arthur. We're only trying to make things easier." "Easy isn't always honest," he said. The kitchen went quiet. That night, his body punished him. He froze in the bathroom doorway, one hand gripping the frame, his feet refusing to move. I got my shoulder under his arm and guided him to the safety rail. His weight sagged against me. My wrist struck the sink hard enough to bruise. When he was seated, he covered his face. "Don't look at me like this. I'm looking at you like my dad." His breathing shook. "You shouldn't have to do this." "Bodies fail," I said. "Love shouldn't." He lowered his hands. His eyes were wet. He took my bruised wrist between his trembling hands. "You are my daughter," he said, "not this family's free nurse." I wanted those words to heal everything. They didn't, but they named what everyone else kept using. A few days later, I came home early and heard his voice in the garage. "I need to fix something before I'm too sick to fix it," he said. I stopped outside the door. Then I stepped back. I have spent years listening for Dad's breathing, footsteps, medication timer. That day, I let him have a private sentence. I did not know the man on the other end was Walter Hensley. When Dad came back inside, he looked tired in a new way, not defeated. Walter Hensley's office sat above a small insurance agency in Worthington, in a brick building with narrow stairs and a brass directory worn dull. Dad told Mom he was seeing an old legal fellow about house papers, which was true enough. Walter was in his late 60s with silver hair, square glasses, and the calm voice of a man who had watched families destroy themselves. "Arthur," he said, "if you want this to hold, we do it slowly and we do it clean." Dad liked clean. Labeled sockets, sharpened blades, oil change before the engine complained. When Walter said fillings were not enough, Dad listened. "I want Nora protected," Dad said. "And I want Marjorie safe in her own home." Walter wrote both sentences down. Then he asked questions Dad did not enjoy. What did he own? Whose name was on the house? Did he understand his diagnosis? Did he understand the difference between thanks and legal compensation? Dad hated being tested. Still, he answered. Walter did not let him sign anything that day. He sent Dad back to Dr. Elaine Brooks for a capacity evaluation. Dr. Brooks documented that he understood his property, his family, and the legal meaning of the choices he wanted to make. Only after that did Walter schedule another meeting. I was not invited. At the time, I thought Dad simply needed privacy. I was too busy to feel left out. There were pharmacy calls, a shower transfer that took 40 minutes, and an insurance denial for a walker Dad needed. Later, Walter told me my absence was deliberate. "No one can say you guided his hand," he said. Dad met Walter alone. Mom met Walter separately. Walter made sure she understood the house would not be ripped away from her. She would have the right to live there unless she freely chose something else. Not Garrett's version of freely. Not Sabrina's version whispered over coffee. Freely. The trust was built around that word. The Whitman Family Revocable Living Trust said Mom could remain in the house. If anyone pushed for a sale while she was grieving, confused, or pressured, the trustee could demand an independent review before anything moved forward. Then came the caregiver agreement. Dad made Walter list what I did, not in pretty family language, but in work language. Medication management, appointment transportation, fall risk monitoring, personal care support, insurance communication, home safety modifications, emergency logs, overnight supervision. It looked cold on paper. It felt like mercy. The agreement said compensation would be deferred until after Dad's death. Not a gift, not a daughter grabbing extra. Wages delayed because the worker had been family. Walter asked Dad if he wanted to punish Garrett. Dad said no. "I don't want to punish my son," Dad said. "I want to stop him from stealing my daughter's years and calling it peace." Walter prepared a video statement, but warned Dad not to use it as a weapon. Facts, Arthur, not revenge. Dad sat by the living room window when they recorded it. His hands shook. His voice did not. Before Walter left, Dad asked for one extra thing. A business card. A plain envelope. A sentence written in his own hand. "Call him before you sign anything." Dad did not become peaceful after signing those papers. If anything, he became quieter. There is a difference between a man who has given up and a man who is waiting for the right time. Back then, I did not know which one he was. I only knew he spent more afternoons in the garage, sitting in his old chair beside the workbench, staring at tools he could no longer trust his hands to use. Sometimes, I found him there with the door cracked open and the radio low. "Dad, you cold?" I would ask. "No," he'd say, "just thinking." Dad's thinking had a smell. Motor oil, sawdust, old coffee, and winter air sneaking under the garage door. What I did not know was that he had placed a plain envelope in the back of the second drawer of his workbench. Not in a safe, not in the desk Mom used for bills, not anywhere Garrett would search if he came looking for control. Garrett hated the garage after Dad got sick. Too dusty, he said. Too cluttered. Too sad. That made it perfect. The original document stayed with Walter Hensley. Dad kept only what Walter said was safe to keep, along with that business card and one handwritten line meant for me. Call him before you sign anything. At the same time, Sabrina's boutique was becoming less of a dream and more of a hole with pretty lighting. She had opened it with soft music, scented candles, and a sign that said, "Curated Women's Fashion." Mom loved saying that word, curated, as if Sabrina had built something classy enough to lift the whole family. But by then, boxes sat unopened in the back room. Vendors called twice before noon. Online ads swallowed money and returned nothing but clicks from strangers who never bought. Sabrina did not tell Mom that part. She told Mom business was seasonal. She told Mom every small shop went through tight months. She told Mom family believed in each other. The first time Mom helped, it was $300 on a card for a website renewal Sabrina said could not wait. Mom told me later, almost proudly, as if she had been useful. "She works so hard," my mom said, "and Garrett has enough pressure." I looked at Dad. His eyes were fixed on the TV, but his jaw had tightened. After that, the favors grew. A vendor deposit, a photography fee, a rush order Sabrina claimed would sell out by Mother's Day. Always just enough to sound harmless. Always wrapped in gratitude. Always followed by Sabrina bringing Mom flowers or calling her sweetheart in that honeyed voice. I did not see the bank statements. I was tracking blood pressure, tremors, bowel schedules, fall risks, pill refills, insurance appeals, and the slow humiliation of a man who once rebuilt engines for neighbors just because he could. That was Sabrina's advantage. She understood that caregiving makes a person busy in the places where thieves prefer silence. If you are listening to Nora's story and you believe a family caregiver should never be called a freeloader, please leave a like and share the advice you would give her in the comments. There is still a truth hidden inside the Whitman house that will make everyone at that table stop speaking. Will Arthur's last protection reach his daughter before Garrett and Sabrina take everything? One evening, I brought Dad his medication and found him folding a piece of paper with both hands. The movement was clumsy but careful. "What's that?" And I asked. "Nothing you need today." And I frowned. That sounds like something I definitely need today. He gave me a tired smile. "No, today you need dinner." That was Dad. Even when his body betrayed him, he still tried to be the father standing between me and the storm. I wish I had pushed harder. I wish I had asked what he had written, who Walter Hensley was, why Mom sometimes looked guilty after Sabrina left, and why Garrett has started saying things like, "When the time comes, we'll all have to be practical." But caregivers live inside the next task, the next pill, the next transfer, the next appointment, the next fall that has not happened yet but might. So I made grilled cheese, tomato soup, and soft peaches because Dad could manage them that night. Mom said Sabrina might stop by later. Dad said, "Lock the checkbook drawer." Mom blinked. "Arthur." He looked at her, not angry, just clear. Kindness without boundaries is just an invitation. Nobody answered him. In the garage, the envelope waited. In the bank account, the pattern had already started. And in our family, the word practical was slowly becoming another name for betrayal. Dad died on a Tuesday morning, before sunrise. The hospice nurse had warned us that the end was close, but warnings do not soften the last breath. They only give you something to remember later, when your mind starts asking why you did not stop the impossible. Mom was asleep in the recliner, one hand curled under her cheek like a child. I was sitting beside Dad's bed, holding a damp cloth I no longer needed. His breathing had changed during the night, long spaces, small returns, then one quiet stretch that did not end. I pressed 2 fingers to his wrist. Nothing. For 6 years, my body had responded to every sound he made. A cough, a shift, a dropped cup, the scrape of a walker. But when the house finally became still, I did not move right away. I just sat there with my hand on my father's arm, waiting for the daughter in me to understand what the nurse in me already knew. Garrett arrived after the hospice nurse had called the time. He came through the front door in a dark coat, hair still wet from the shower, smelling faintly of cologne and cold air. Sabrina followed him with red eyes and a black scarf, already prepared for the shape of mourning. Mom woke when Garrett knelt beside her. "I'm here," he said. Those 2 words broke her. She folded into him like he had been there all along. I stepped back, not because I wanted to, because grief in our family always seemed to make room for Garrett first. The funeral was held at a small church off High Street, the kind with polished wooden pews and a basement where women in cardigans organized coffee and paper plates without being asked. Dad would have hated the attention, but he would have liked the hymns. Old, steady, no performance. The pastor spoke about a man who fixed what was broken. I looked at Dad's closed casket and thought, not everything. After the service, Garrett walked to the front with a folded piece of paper. He cleared his throat twice. Sabrina sat beside Mom, holding her hand with both of hers. Aunt Ruth dabbed her eyes. Neighbors leaned forward. Garrett began well. He talked about Dad teaching him to change oil, about summer evenings in the garage, about country music and black coffee. People smiled through tears. Then his voice softened into something practiced. "These last years were hard," he said, "but we came together as a family. We cared for Dad together. We made sure he knew he was loved every day." My hands went cold in my lap. Together. That word moved through the church like incense, sweet enough to hide the rot underneath. I saw Thanksgiving photos that did not show the laundry room. Christmas promises that ended at the driveway. Hospital nights Garrett slept through. Medication charts he had never read. The shower chair he never cleaned. The panic in Dad's eyes when his legs would not obey, and only I was close enough to catch him. No one else saw those things. They saw Garrett at the podium, handsome in a black suit, voice breaking at the right places. Sabrina lowered her head. Mom cried harder. Aunt Ruth whispered, "Such a good son." I did not stand up. I did not correct him. There are moments when truth would sound like cruelty because a liar has chosen the perfect room. Afterward, everyone came back to the house. Neighbors brought ham, deviled eggs, pasta salad, and more coffee than anyone could drink. The kitchen filled with low voices and soft shoes. People hugged Mom. They told Garrett his speech was beautiful. Sabrina moved through the room like a hostess, taking coats, refilling cups, touching shoulders. When she reached me, she tilted her head. "You held up well," she said. It sounded like a compliment until I heard what sat behind it. I looked at her. I wasn't performing. Her smile did not change, but her eyes did. Near the sink, I saw Walter Hensley speaking quietly to Mom. He wore a dark suit and held his hat in both hands. I did not know his face then, only that Dad had once mentioned a legal fellow in passing. Walter nodded to me politely before leaving through the side door. Garrett noticed him too. "Who was that?" he asked. "An old friend of your father's," Mom said quickly. Sabrina's gaze sharpened, then softened before anyone could catch it. By evening, the flowers had already begun to wilt. The house smelled of lilies, coffee, and food left uncovered too long. I carried trash bags to the garage and stood for a moment beside Dad's workbench. His chair was empty. For the first time, I understood that losing him would not be the only battle. It would only remove the one person who had finally started seeing me. The morning after the funeral, I found a paper plate of untouched ham in the refrigerator and 3 sympathy cards on the kitchen table. Mom had not opened them. She sat in Dad's recliner with a blanket over her lap, staring at the television while a morning show laughed too brightly at something none of us heard. Her coffee had gone cold beside her. I touched the mug and carried it to the microwave. "You don't have to do that," she said. "I know, but my hands did it anyway." 6 years of care does not end because death signs the discharge papers. My body still listened for Dad. My eyes still checked the hallway. My mind still counted pills that were no longer needed. Garrett came over before noon with Sabrina. He did not bring food. He brought urgency. "We need to start making decisions," he said. Mom blinked at him.
"Already?" "Not everything," he said, softening his voice. "Just the big picture. The house, bills, paperwork. We can't let things sit." Sabrina knelt beside Mom's chair and took her hand. "You shouldn't have to carry all of this, Marjorie. Let us help." I stood in the doorway with the reheated coffee in my hand. "Help with what exactly?" I asked. Garrett glanced at me like I had interrupted a private meeting in a house I had not lived in for 6 years. "We're talking to Mom."
I heard that. Sabrina rolled slowly. "Nora, this is not an attack." That was Sabrina's favorite trick. She would name the thing she was doing, then deny it before anyone else could. Garrett said the house was too much. Sabrina said Mom needed peace. They both used words that sounded kind enough to pass in front of a grieving widow. But that evening, Sabrina posted on Facebook. "Grief reveals who loved the person and who loved the property. No names, no details. Just enough poison to let people season it themselves." By breakfast the next day, Aunt Ruth had texted me. "Honey, please don't make this harder on your mother." Then a cousin from Dayton. "Your dad would hate seeing everyone fight over money." Then one of Mom's church friends. "You lived there a long time, dear. Maybe think about what is fair." I read that one in the parking lot of the pharmacy while waiting for Mom's sleep medication. My hands were so cold, I almost dropped the phone. Fair. I wanted to ask where fairness had been when Dad's legs locked in the bathroom. Where it had been when Garrett missed appointments and Sabrina sent heart emojis to a care chat she never used. Where it had been when my supervisor offered me a future and I chose my father's pill schedule instead. But I had already learned that anger from a tired woman gets called bitterness. So I typed nothing. Garrett was not silent. He called Aunt Ruth and told her I seemed confused about boundaries. He said I had been in the house so long, I might think of it as mine. He said he was worried I was not letting Mom make her own decisions. Sabrina sent a group text to relatives. "Let's keep Arthur's memory peaceful. Marjorie needs love, not pressure." She added a white heart. Aunt Ruth replied with praying hands. I stared at the message until the letters blurred. That was how they did it. Garrett carried the accusation. Sabrina carried the sympathy. Together, they made a trap soft enough for decent people to step into. That afternoon, Sabrina found me in the laundry room, folding Mom's sheets. "You wouldn't fight your own mother about selling, would you, honey?" I laid a pillowcase flat. "I won't fight Mom." She smiled. I looked up. "I'll fight whoever's speaking through her." The smile vanished so quickly I almost missed it. Garrett started talking to a realtor he knew through the dealership. Nothing official, he claimed. Just information. Just being practical. Just trying to avoid a mess. But he had already started making one. 2 days later, Mom asked me if I thought Dad would be ashamed of us. "Of us?" I said.
She looked toward the window. Garrett says families fall apart over houses.
No, I said, softer than I felt. Families fall apart when one person gets to decide what everyone else's sacrifice was worth. Mom's eyes filled, but she did not answer. That night, I passed the kitchen and heard Garrett on the phone in the den. She won't listen, he said. I think Nora's isolating Mom. I stopped breathing. Then he added,
Colder. There are people you can call for that. Garrett brought the paper on the Thursday afternoon.
Mom was at the kitchen table with a cup of tea she had not touched. She looked tired in a way sleep could not repair. Her hair was still pinned from church, but unevenly, like her hands had given up halfway through. Garrett placed a document in front of her. It's just a financial power of attorney, he said. Nothing dramatic. It lets me help with bills, insurance calls, the realtor, stuff like that. I was standing by the sink rinsing a mug. What realtor calls? I asked. He did not look at me. Adult children help widowed parents all the time, Nora. Mom touched the edge of the paper. Do I need a lawyer? Sabrina, sitting beside her, gave a small laugh. Marjorie, honey, you don't need to pay some stranger hundreds of dollars to tell you your son loves you. That sentence did more damage than an insult would have. Mom's face softened with guilt. I stepped closer. Mom, you should not sign anything today. Garrett finally turned. There it is. Mom, there what is? The control. The word hit the room hard. Mom looked between us, frightened already. Sabrina lowered her voice like she was calming the child. Nora, nobody is taking anything from you. Then stop asking Mom to sign papers she doesn't understand. Garrett slid a pen toward Mom, the same way he would later slide one toward me. This helps me protect her, he said. Unless you have a problem with that. Mom's hand trembled as she signed. Not because she understood, because peace had become something she believed she owed the loudest person in the room. 2 days later, a realtor called the house and asked when they could come take preliminary photos. I was folding Mom's clean towels when she handed me the phone with a confused look. Photos of what? She whispered. The realtor sounded embarrassed. Mrs. Whitman sent a pre-listing confirmation email. Mom shook her head. I didn't send anything. Across the room, Sabrina's face went still. It lasted only a second, but I saw it. I asked the realtor to forward the email. It came from Mom's account, written in neat, cheerful language that did not sound like her. Thank you for helping me move forward. I'm ready to discuss listing the property soon. Mom read it twice. I don't remember writing this. Garrett took the phone from her hand. You've been exhausted. That happens. No, I said. Emails don't write themselves because someone is tired. His eyes sharpened. That night, he called Adult Protective Services. I did not know until Monday morning when Lillian Price knocked on the front door. She was a composed woman in a navy coat with silver-streaked hair and a voice trained not to accuse. Ms. Nora Whitman, I'm here to follow up on a concern regarding Mrs. Marjorie Whitman. Mom froze behind me. Garrett had told them I might be isolating her, that I controlled the house, that I managed her access to visitors and information, that I was resisting her financial decisions. The words were formal. The wound was personal. Miss Price sat with us in the living room. She explained that her job was to assess safety, not choose sides. She asked who handled medication, who handled money, who made household decisions, whether Mom felt pressured by anyone. I answered plainly. Mom answered softly. Then Miss Price asked, Mrs. Whitman, do you feel Nora prevents you from making your own choices? Mom looked at me, then at Garrett, who stood near the hallway with his arms folded. A few seconds passed.
Only a few, but they were long enough to take 6 years of care and hang a question mark over it. I don't know, Mom whispered.
Everyone keeps telling me different things. My chest went hollow.
Garrett looked almost satisfied.
Miss Price wrote something down. Not cruelly, not triumphantly, just doing her job. That was the worst part. Garrett had not needed her to be unfair. He only needed the system to hear his version first. After she left, Mom cried into her hands. I didn't mean you, she said. I stood by the window, watching Miss Price walk to her car. I know. But knowing did not make it hurt less. Garrett came close enough that only I could hear him. You should have signed when I asked nicely. I looked at him then, really looked. My brother was not grieving badly. He was using grief well. I sat on the edge of my bed that night with my laptop open and my hands shaking over the keyboard. The room was dark except for the screen. My old high school lamp had burned out days ago, and I had not replaced the bulb because grief makes even small errands feel like climbing stairs with wet clothes on. I opened Facebook. Then I started typing. I wrote about the Thanksgiving photo, the Christmas Eve promise, the bruises, the insurance calls, the nights Dad cried because his legs would not obey him. I listed the grab bars, the shower chair, the medication alarms, the ER visits, the way Garrett could miss 3 appointments and still be called a devoted son because he knew how to speak in a church voice. I almost attached pictures. The hallway rug I had removed after Dad tripped on it. The notebook pages filled with dates and blood pressure readings. The receipt from Home Depot. The screenshot of Sabrina's post about grief and property. My finger hovered over post. Then I saw Sabrina's face in my mind. Not crying, smiling, waiting. If I posted that while shaking, she would call it unstable. If I used too many details, Garrett would call it obsessive. If I sounded angry, Aunt Ruth would say grief had made me bitter. I closed the draft, not because I had nothing to say, because I finally understood they were not afraid of my pain. They were counting on it to make me look small. So I made a folder instead. Screenshots, dates, emails, texts from relatives, the realtor message, Sabrina's Facebook post, Garrett's group text dressed up as concern. I saved each file with a name clear enough that a stranger could follow it. No tears in the labels, just facts. After midnight, I went downstairs. The house made old sounds around me. The furnace clicking on, the refrigerator settling, Mom's uneven footsteps above me. I passed the living room without turning on the light. Dad's recliner sat in the corner, empty and aimed at a television nobody had watched properly since he died. I went to the garage. Cold air met me as soon as I opened the door. The smell hit next. Motor oil, dust, cardboard, and the faint metallic scent of tools that had belonged to my father longer than I had been alive. For a while, I just stood there. Dad's workbench was crowded but orderly. Socket trays, a coffee can of screws, a yellow tape measure, a pair of gloves stiff from age. His handwriting still marked little drawers with labels like washers, fuses, blades. I pulled open the second drawer because I was looking for nothing and everything. At the back, beneath an old owner's manual for a lawnmower, was a plain envelope. My name was on it, Nora. Not honey, not sweetheart, not nurse, not problem. Just my name, written by a hand that had fought tremors to leave it there. I opened it carefully. Inside was a business card. Walter Hensley, elder law and probate attorney, Worthington, Ohio. Behind it was a folded note. Call him before you sign anything. I sat down on Dad's old chair so fast it scraped the concrete.
For the first time since Garrett slid that blue folder across the kitchen table, the room did not feel like it was closing around me. Dad had known. Not everything, maybe. Not every ugly sentence. Not the exact way Garrett would use Mom's fear, or how Sabrina would wrap theft in perfume and sympathy. But he had known enough.
I pressed the note against my chest and cried without making noise. Not the kind of crying that asks someone to come comfort you. The kind that happens when one person finally reaches you from the other side of a locked door. In the morning, I drove to the parking lot behind the home care agency before my shift. The sun had barely lifted over the strip mall roofs. My coffee sat untouched in the cup holder. I called the number on the card. A woman answered, then transferred me. Walter Hensley's voice came on the line, low and careful. "Ms. Whitman?" "This is Nora," I said. "Arthur Whitman's daughter." A pause. Then his voice changed. Not warmer exactly, but more awake. "Have you signed anything?" "No." "Good," he said. "Then your father's timing held." I looked at the folded note on my passenger seat. For 6 years, I had been the one catching Dad before he fell. That morning, for the first time, I understood he had been trying to catch me too. Walter's office was on the second floor of an old brick building in Worthington, above an insurance agency and a tax preparer. The stairwell smelled like carpet cleaner and raincoats. I remember that because my mind was grabbing at ordinary things, anything to keep from imagining Garrett's face if he knew where I was. Walter met me at the door himself. He was tall, a little stooped, with square glasses and a tie that looked older than some lawyers. He shook my hand with both of his. "Miss Whitman," he said, "I'm sorry about your father." I nodded because words felt dangerous. His office was not fancy. No glass walls, no shiny conference table, just shelves of legal books, framed certificates, and a coffee mug with the faded Ohio State logo. On his desk sat a thick file labeled Arthur Whitman. Seeing Dad's name printed that way nearly undid me. Walter did not rush. "Before we discuss anything," he said, "I need to know exactly what has happened since your father passed." So I told him, not like a daughter begging to be believed, like a nurse giving a report. The dinner table, the blue folder, Sabrina's post, the realtor email, the power of attorney, adult protective services, Mom's hesitation, Garrett's whisper on the porch. Walter listened without interrupting. Once or twice he wrote a note. When I finished, he removed his glasses and laid them on the desk. "Your father was concerned this might happen." The sentence landed softly, but it opened something in me. He knew Garrett would do this? "He knew grief can make weak people easier to steer," Walter said. "And he knew your brother had a talent for steering." He opened the file. The first document was the Whitman Family Revocable Living Trust. Walter explained it in plain English, not legal smoke. Mom had the right to remain in the house. She could leave if she truly wanted, but no one could shove a for sale sign into the yard and call it her decision. If there were signs of pressure or confusion, the trustee could require an independent evaluation before any sale moved forward. "Your mother was protected," he said. That mattered to Arthur. I looked down at my hands. He still loved her. Very much. The second document was harder. Caregiver agreement. My throat tightened before I read the first line. Walter turned the pages slowly. Medication management, appointment transportation, personal care, overnight supervision, emergency response, insurance coordination, home safety modifications. 6 years of my life, reduced to words so plain they felt almost holy. "This is not a bonus," Walter said. "It is not your father favoring you over Garrett. It is deferred compensation for documented labor."
Labor. Not daughterly duty, not helping out, not living rent-free. Labor. I pressed my fingers to my mouth. Walter waited. When did he sign this? I asked. After Dr. Brooks evaluated his capacity.
Your father understood his assets, his family, and the consequences of these decisions. I also met with him without you present. I didn't even know.
That was intentional. Arthur did not want anyone claiming you influenced him. There it was again. Dad thinking 2 steps ahead, while I was still trying to survive one day at a time. Walter showed me Dr. Elaine Brooks' letter. Clean, clinical, impossible to twist into sentiment. Then his meeting notes, dates, times, who was present,
What was discussed? The record had weight. Garrett had volume. For the first time, I understood the difference.
Walter reached for another envelope, but did not open it. Your father also recorded a statement. I went still. I won't play it today, he said. Not because you cannot hear it, because it should be used carefully. Your father did not create it to comfort you privately. He created it to protect the truth publicly if necessary. I swallowed hard. What if Garrett contests everything? Then Garrett will discover that a courtroom is not a kitchen table.
It was the closest Walter came to sounding angry. He prepared a formal notice while I sat across from him, numb and breathing. Garrett, Sabrina, and Mom were to attend a meeting regarding the trust, the caregiver agreement, and recent concerns about financial conduct involving Marjorie Whitman. When I stood to leave, Walter handed me a copy of Dad's note in a plastic sleeve. Keep the original safe, he said. At the door, I turned back. Did my father think I was selfish? Walter looked at me for a long moment. No, Miss Whitman. He was afraid they would make you think you were. I made it to my car before I cried. But this time, the tears did not feel like surrender. They felt like my father, from somewhere beyond that garage, finally calling my sacrifice by its proper name. Garrett arrived first, Wearing a charcoal suit and the expression he used when customers hesitated over financing. Sabrina came in beside him with the leather folder tucked under one arm. She looked composed, almost bored, as if this meeting were a delay between her and a sensible sale. Mom followed them slowly. Her coat hung loose on her shoulders. She did not look at me when she sat down. Walter sat at the head of the table. I sat to his right. Garrett noticed that and smiled without warmth. So this is what we're doing now? He said. Lawyers against family. Walter folded his hands. We're here to discuss Mr. Arthur Whitman's estate planning documents, Mrs. Whitman's housing rights, and several concerns involving recent financial decisions. Sabrina gave a soft sigh. Robert would have wanted peace. Arthur, I said. She blinked. Excuse me? His name was Arthur. You can use it if you're going to speak for him. Garrett leaned forward. Dad would hate this attitude. Walter opened the first folder. Then let's begin with facts instead of guessing what he would hate. He placed copies of my care logs on the table. Not all of them, just enough to make the room change temperature. Medication charts, neurology appointments, ER discharge papers, receipts for grab bars, non-slip mats, a shower chair, bed rails, and pharmacy items insurance had refused. Garrett glanced at the stack. None of that gives Nora the house. Correct, Walter said. It proves she was not living there for free. The words sat there. Sabrina's fingers tightened around her folder. Walter continued. Your father documented Nora's caregiving duties over several years. He also signed a caregiver agreement providing deferred compensation for that work. Garrett laughed once. Dad had Parkinson's. You're telling me he understood legal contracts?
Walter slid another document forward. Dr. Elaine Brooks evaluated him. Her report states that Arthur Whitman understood his property, his family relationships, and the legal consequences of the documents he signed. Garrett's face shifted, but only slightly. Sabrina recovered first. Nora was his nurse. Emotional dependence can be powerful. She was not present when these documents were discussed or signed, Walter said. I met with Arthur alone. I met with Marjorie separately. The notes are dated. Mom flinched when her name entered the room. Garrett turned to her. Mom, did you know about all this? She looked trapped between breath and answer. Walter's voice stayed calm. Mrs. Whitman was advised that the trust protects her right to remain in the home. No one can force a sale merely because it is convenient for someone else. Sabrina's face lost a little color. Garrett pushed back his chair an inch. This is ridiculous. Nora gets in Dad's head, then you wrap it in paperwork. Walter looked at him for a long second. Your father anticipated that accusation. He opened the envelope. My stomach tightened. Walter turned a small screen toward the table and pressed play. Dad appeared by the living room window, thinner than I remembered. One shoulder tucked into the old plaid robe he refused to throw away. His right hand trembled against the armrest. His eyes were tired but clear. If you're watching this, he said, then I'm gone. And somebody is making Nora explain the years she gave me. Mom made a sound like something breaking. Dad continued. She does not owe this family an apology. Nora did not live in my house for free. She paid with years none of you offered. Garrett stared at the screen. Sabrina looked down. Dad's voice weakened, but the words did not. I love my son. I love my wife. But love does not mean letting one child stand in the light while the other carries the weight in the dark. Garrett was not here enough to define what Nora gave up. I could not look at my brother. I watched Dad. Marjorie, he said, and Mom covered her mouth. You have a soft heart. That is why I wanted paper stronger than grief. Do not let anyone rush you out of your home while you are scared. Then Dad looked straight into the camera. And Nora, you do not have to prove you are a good daughter by letting them take the rest of your life. The video ended. No one moved. For once, Garrett had no room to perform. Sabrina had no sweet sentence ready. Mom was crying into both hands. I sat very still because if I moved, I thought I might reach through that dead screen and try to touch my father's face. Garrett stood abruptly. I'm contesting it, he said. All of it. Walter closed the folder. You have that right. Garrett pointed at me. You did this. For the first time in years, I did not lower my eyes. No, I said. Dad finally wrote down what you kept hoping would disappear. The mediation took place in a conference room with no family pictures on the wall. That mattered. No one could point to Dad's old chair. No one could weaponize Mom's trembling hands. No one could say, after everything we've been through, and expect the room to bow its head. Walter sat beside me with a yellow legal pad and a pen he barely used. Across the table, Garrett kept tapping his thumb against his knee. Sabrina had brought tissues. I noticed because she placed them where everyone could see. Mom sat at the end of the table, not beside Garrett this time. Walter had insisted she have separate counsel present for her own protection. That small change made Garrett restless before anyone spoke. The mediator, a woman named Patricia Lowell, began quietly. We are not here to decide who loved Arthur Whitman more, she said. We are here to address the validity of documents, the protection of Mrs. Whitman, and possible financial misuse. Garrett leaned forward. My sister is turning my father's death into a bill. Walter did not look at him. He opened a folder. Doctor,
Elaine Brooks confirms Arthur Whitman had legal capacity when the trust and caregiver agreement were executed.
Patricia read the letter. Her face gave away nothing.
Then came Carmen Reyes. She had been Dad's hospice aide 2 mornings a week during his final year. She was small, direct, and impossible to charm. When asked who handled most of Dad's day-to-day care, Carmen did not hesitate.
Nora.
Garrett shifted.
I visited. Carmen looked at him. I didn't say you didn't visit. I said she cared for him.
It was the cleanest cut I had ever heard. She described medication notes taped inside the cabinet, transfer instructions by the bathroom, my phone number written on emergency sheets, my handwriting on almost everything that kept Dad safe. Then she added something I had not known she remembered. One time, Mr. Garrett told Arthur not to let lawyers get between families.
Arthur got upset after that. Garrett's face reddened. That was private. Carmen shrugged. So was his fear. Sabrina reached for tissue.
The bank records came next. Denise Walker from Mom's Bank appeared by video call, professional and careful. She did not accuse Sabrina of theft. She did something worse for Sabrina. She explained patterns, website ads, vendor deposits, clothing inventory, photography fees, transactions tied to Sabrina's boutique made from Mom's account, increasing after Dad's condition worsened and again after his death.
Sabrina dabbed under one eye. Marjorie wanted to help me. She believed in my business. Mom looked down. Walter's voice stayed level. Mrs. Whitman, did you approve every one of these charges? Mom's lips moved before sound came. I thought some were small things, she said. I didn't know there were that many.
Garrett turned toward Sabrina. For the first time, his anger was not pointed at me. Walter placed one final exhibit on the table, the pre-listing email. It had been sent from Mom's account at 2:14 p.m. on a Tuesday, saying she was ready to discuss listing the house. At 2:14 p.m., Mom had been at Dr. Brooks's office with me, signing in for a follow-up visit. The clinic record showed it. The parking receipt showed it. Mom's phone had been in her purse, silenced, because I had silenced it for the appointment. Sabrina stopped crying. That was how I knew the hit landed. Patricia looked at her. Mrs. Whitman, did you send this email?
Mom shook her head. No. Garrett whispered, Sabrina. She did not answer him. Walter closed the folder. If this dispute continues, we will request a broader review of Mrs. Whitman's financial accounts and communications. If necessary, the matter can be referred for investigation of potential financial exploitation. The room went still.
Not dramatic still, consequential still. Mom lifted her head slowly. Her voice was weak, but it held. I signed things because Garrett said it would keep the family peaceful, she said. I never asked what that peace was costing Nora. My throat tightened, but I did not rescue her from the silence. Some truths need to finish hurting before they can start healing. Garrett stared at the table. Sabrina's tissue remained untouched in her hand. For years, they had trusted grief, guilt, and good manners to cover their tracks. But paper remembers what people edit. The trust held. That was how Walter said it, clean and simple, as if those 3 words did not carry 6 years of my breathing. Mom would remain in the house for as long as she wanted and was able. No realtor could be brought in because Garrett felt urgent. No sale could be pushed through because Sabrina needed rescue money dressed up as practicality. If Mom ever chose to move, it would have to be her choice, made clearly, away from pressure. My caregiver agreement was honored. Not as a gift, not as pity, not as a daughter being rewarded for behaving well. Deferred compensation. Those words did not hug me. They did not give me back the promotion I lost, or the man who stopped waiting, or the mornings I woke with my back aching before I even stood up. But they did something my family had refused to do. They admitted the work had existed. Garrett was removed from every financial role involving Mom. Sabrina's access to Mom's bank account, email, and personal paperwork ended immediately. Together, they signed a repayment agreement for the money tied to Sabrina's boutique. Walter made the next part very clear. If they pressured Mom again or touched one more account without authority, the file would move beyond family mediation. Garrett did not explode. That surprised me. He sat with his mouth tight and his eyes dull, like a man watching his own reflection disappear. For years, he had been the responsible son because everyone agreed not to ask for proof. Now, proof had arrived, and it did not know how to flatter him. Sabrina cried in the hallway after signing. Not loudly, not beautifully, just hard enough to smear her mascara. I did not comfort her. That may sound cruel, but mercy becomes dangerous when it is always expected from the person who was harmed. Aunt Ruth called 2 days later.
"I should have asked more questions," she said. "Yes," I answered. There was a long silence. "I'm sorry, Nora." I looked at the bare wall of my new apartment, where no family photo had been hung yet. "Next time, ask who was actually in the room before you judge who wanted the house."
I moved out 3 weeks after the settlement. Mom cried when I carried the last box to my car. I did not punish her with silence, but I did not hand her easy forgiveness either. She had loved me. She had also failed me. Both things could sit in the same room. A professional caregiver began coming 3 afternoons a week, paid through the trust. On Sundays, I visited Mom with coffee and grocery store flowers. We talked carefully at first about weather, church, Dad's old radio. Later, about harder things. One Sunday, she said, "Your father saw you better than I did." I looked at her hands, older now without Dad's care to hide behind. "Yes," I said, "he did." Spring came slowly to Columbus. I returned to nursing part-time, not because I was broken, but because I had finally learned that being useful was not the same as being used. At the community library, I started a small support group for family caregivers. The first week, 7 people came. A woman caring for her husband after a stroke. A man tracking his mother's dementia medications. A daughter who looked at me with the same tired eyes I used to see in my bathroom mirror. I told them to keep logs, save receipts, make schedules in writing. Ask for help before love turns into proof no one can see. I told them, paperwork does not destroy a decent family. It protects one from the people who confuse silence with permission. One afternoon, I went back to Dad's garage. Mom had found a small metal toolbox with my name taped to the top. Inside was an old wrench, 2 photographs, and a folded note. For the daughter who fixed more than I ever knew how to. I laughed first. Then I cried. When I left the house that evening, I looked up at the living room window where Dad had recorded the words that saved me. For once, the house did not feel like a place I had been trapped. It felt like a place I had survived. I was not the daughter who lived there for free. I had paid in time, sleep, skin, youth, and chances I would never get back. But I was done paying. And for the first time in 6 years, my life did not feel borrowed. It felt like mine. Life leaves us with this lesson. Love should never require someone to disappear so the family can look peaceful. A caregiver is not a freeloader, and sacrifice is not worthless just because it happens quietly. If this story touched you, please leave a like for the channel. If you have any thoughts or advice, share them in the comments below. And tell us what part of the world you are listening from. Thank you for staying until the end. Wishing you health, peace, and strength. Goodbye for now, and see you again in the next story on Revenge Glow.